Chapter 16. Tangled Chains and Burning Steel. Derek and Isabel had been walking in silence for half an hour, surrounded by untamed jungle. Towering trees, their trunks as thick as fortress walls, loomed overhead, their canopies blocking out most of the sunlight. Vines twisted in every direction, some hanging like nooses, others coiling around branches. The undergrowth was a dense tangle of ferns and broad-leafed plants, some faintly bioluminescent. Strange insects flitted through the thick, humid air, their wings humming softly. Distant howls and clicks echoed through the foliage, a constant reminder that they were never truly alone. Derek was focused on analyzing the data from the recent modifications to the Nova. His display had updated its information following his so-called level up, and he was eager to make sense of the changes. Auric Level Iron 4. Upgrades available. 2. The upgrades had to be enhancements, like the one he had applied to his left plasma cannon using the sphere. As for the level, however, it seemed leveling up required killing. Would it work with people too? That seemed highly likely. A shiver ran down his spine. Whoever had designed this system clearly intended for creatures and people to fight each other, ensuring only the strongest survived. But what was the point? If the goal was to make people kill each other, there were far easier ways. You didn't even have to interfere. Sooner or later, people always found a reason to do it themselves. The more he uncovered about this world, the clearer it became that he was standing before a mystery far greater and older than he had imagined. Something that might trace all the way back to the ancient Wardalay themselves. But now, he had to focus on the how, not the why. If he wanted to survive, he needed to understand the mechanics of this world. From what he had observed, each level up unlocked new upgrade opportunities. That meant every level gained allowed him to use one more sphere. One more level, one more sphere, assuming he had spheres available and was willing to keep modifying Nova with those things, of course. But what else was he missing? His new traveling companion, as unhinged as she was, might have crucial information, and he needed to take advantage of that. Derek cleared his throat. "Can I ask you a question?" Isabel, walking beside him, nodded without breaking stride. "Do these spheres fall from the sky often?" A wrinkle of concern creased her forehead. "It depends on the period. Lately, it's been happening more and more frequently." "And what do you usually do with them? Just leave them where they fall?" "No, we recover them and use their power to make ourselves stronger." Isabel turned to look at him. Her large gray eyes studied him through the helmet of the Nova armor. "Do you really know nothing about the spheres?" At this point, denying it would be pointless. Derek shook his head. She frowned. "If that's true, there's much you don't know about how we live. And I'd wager there's plenty we don't know about where you come from." Derek nodded. She had no idea how true that was. "So those things you did, that strange light barrier that protected you, and that lightning strike you called down on the beast? Yes, those are powers I've gained thanks to the spheres and the benevolence of Orbisar." She made a gesture toward the sky. "So, you just find a bunch of these spheres and become super powerful?" Derek asked. It almost sounded fun, if not for all the violence the system demanded. And if you didn't count the whole risk of going insane she had mentioned. Okay, it was totally not fun. Isabel's eyes widened. Of course not. Each being can only absorb a limited amount of energy from the spheres without losing control. If you exceed what your aura can contain, the power will take over you. Derek narrowed his eyes. "So that's what drives you mad? Taking in more energy than you can handle? And how do you know how much power someone's aura can take before it breaks them?" "There are seers who specialize in this. They peer into a person's soul and determine how much power they can handle without succumbing to corruption." "So, Derek said. If only those seers can sense people's limits. That means when you're about to fight someone, you have no idea how strong they really are. Isabel bit her lip, thoughtful. Not exactly. We get a vague sense when we're facing someone stronger than us. It's like a feeling of fear. An instinct telling us to run. When there's no trace of that fear, it usually means the opponent is much weaker. Derek nodded. So, the entire system revolved around an individual's level. Leveling up increased one's abilities and the capacity to absorb the power of new spheres. Exactly like what had happened to the Nova. His power armor had somehow integrated into the system, gaining its own level and the ability to absorb the sphere's power. But how had that happened? Maybe the integration of the Kalar node had played a role. He needed to find out more. I bet someone's tried to cheat the system, Derek muttered with a half-smile. Excuse me? Derek sighed and stared up at the treetops. I'm saying I bet some idiot, or some power-hungry maniac, has already tried binging on spheres, ignoring all the warnings about their aura. Isabel's expression darkened. Yes, it happens sometimes. Usually because the person is reckless, other times because the sphere broke, flooding someone with power their aura couldn't handle. That's exactly what happened to the village of Naresh. And how does that usually end? Derek already had a pretty good idea. Isabel lowered her gaze. A crazed, incredibly powerful person roams the streets, attacking anyone they encounter without reason. How do you think it ends? Derek nodded. Pretty obvious. That person would keep killing until someone else put them down. He clenched his jaw. Every new piece of information he gathered about this place only deepened his desire to meet the creator of this system and land a straight armored punch right to their face. Isabel looked back at him. May I ask you a question now? Derek nodded stiffly. Not that he was necessarily going to answer. If spheres don't exist where you come from, how does your magic work? Even though she couldn't see it, Derek smiled. No magic. What powers it is called science. And, in all likelihood, science also explained Isabel's abilities. But he couldn't prove it until he had the chance to study one of those spheres. Science? She raised her eyebrows. Our scholars at the Citadel sometimes use that word when discussing magic. Derek opened his mouth to retort, but a yellow glow filtered through a nearby bush, and he snapped it shut. A flashing light materialized on the mini-map. I think we've found it, he said. Isabel nodded, and, with a smooth, silent motion, unsheathed her sword, settling into a battle-ready stance. She seemed at least partially recovered from the earlier fight. Derek glanced at her, and she gave him a small nod, gesturing for him to move forward. He nodded back and stepped toward the faint light, trying to move as quietly as possible. No easy task with the dense vegetation constantly snagging against his heavy armored legs. Still, he didn't understand all the caution. If some monstrous, rampaging creature were nearby, they would have heard it by now. Those things didn't seem to care much for stealth. With an arm, Derek pushed aside a bush's branch, revealing the sphere. A small iron orb lay partially embedded in the ground, its surface etched with intricate, mysterious symbols. It emitted a soft, pulsing yellow glow, as if wrapped in a transparent shell of energy. He grabbed it. Vanda, scan the object and alert me if you detect any energy leaks or fractures in the outer shell. Looks like when these things lose energy, they can turn dangerous. On it, Derek! A male voice called out from behind him, followed by a metallic jingling. Ah, good. I was afraid I'd be bored out of my mind today, and instead, look what I found. Derek turned, the sphere still in hand. Before him stood a tall, bald thug with small, close-set eyes and a long scar running down his cheek. He wore dented armor, that covered only one shoulder and part of his chest. In his hand, he held a heavy chain that rattled with every movement. Above the man's head, Derek's display flashed a red label. Level Iron 7. Sana! 7. Even higher than the beast that had nearly killed them both. And the fact that he could see the thug's level meant the system had already marked him as hostile. Derek swallowed. He had to find a way to avoid a fight, because if this turned violent, it would end badly. And that probably meant calming down that crazy warden first. Isabel stepped forward, sword at the ready. Who are you? What do you want? The man grinned, revealing yellowed, crooked teeth, some missing entirely. Who are you, lady in white? This doesn't seem like the right place for such a young and lovely maiden. She straightened her back. I am the new warden of this region. My name is Isabel Blackwood. The man raised his eyebrows, his grin never faltering. Didn't know they finally assigned a warden to this forgotten place. I thought the mighty church of Orbisar would have sent someone more experienced. Isabel pointed her sword at him. My experience and my faith in Orbisar will be more than enough to deal with rabble like you. I suggest you turn around and crawl back into whatever hole you came from. The man spread his arms wide. Why, of course. I'll gladly do as the Warden of Narkara commands. He performed an exaggerated bow. Just as soon as that big metallic golem that looks like your messiah hands over the sphere he's holding. Derek stepped beside Isabel. You want this? He shrugged and held up the sphere. And just so you know, I'm not a golem, and I've got nothing to do with whatever messiah you keep talking about. Isabel shot him a glare sharp enough to cut Steele. What? Derek asked. I'm not about to fight and kill people over some damned sky spheres. I'll just wait for the next one. He extended the sphere toward the stranger. The man's grin widened. Hey, there's a real person inside that golem. And even a wise one. I misjudged you, apparently. You've made the right choice, stranger. He stepped forward, reaching out to take the sphere from Derek's armored hand. Isabel stood frozen, watching the scene unfold, her knuckles white as she gripped her sword. The blade trembled slightly. The man turned and began to walk away, but stopped a few meters later. He spun back to face them. You know what? I need to raise my auric level, and I don't know when I'll get another chance like this. 2 easy targets in one go. Derek muttered a curse under his breath. Look, buddy, there's no need for this. I gave you what you wanted. Now leave. The man smirked and began spinning his heavy chain. Derek, Vanda's voice came through his earpiece, calm but urgent. Watch out for that chain, and remember, your energy reserves are low. Don't overdo it. I'll do my best, he whispered. If only he could just run. But doing that would mean leaving the crazy blonde at the mercy of that guy, and she would definitely fight to the death. And that was a damn iron level 7, and something told him this fight was going to be much tougher than it looked. Derek activated his plasma blades. The soft, damp ground beneath his feet lit up with the orange glow of the searing plasma. He shifted into a guarded stance. Given his weight, he'd need to be careful not to sink or slip. The man spun the chain faster, sending a spray of droplets their way. The droplets struck the Nova at an increasing pace, and a damage alert for the outer armor flashed before his eyes. What the hell? Derek! Vanda's voice came through, sharp and urgent. Those droplets are turning into strange spikes just before impact. You need to act fast, or they'll pierce through and kill you. A bubble of light shielded Isabel, while Derek took most of the hits, his armor rattling like a machine gun under fire. More alarms lit up his display. Each of those spikes had punctured his already battered armor. Derek dashed forward at the speed of a racing bike, but almost simultaneously, the man lashed his chain around his feet. The metal links coiled tightly around his ankles, and the ground rushed up to meet him, the sheer weight of the Nova dragging him down relentlessly. As he crashed to the earth, the impact tore the breath from his chest, and warning alerts blared in his ears. Isabel struck with a high overhead slash. The man uncoiled the chain from Derek's legs and leapt back just in time, her blade narrowly missing him. That bastard was as fast as a mongoose. Still on the ground, Derek aimed his enhanced plasma cannon and fired. The man deflected the golden shot with a whirl of his chain, sending the searing plasma bolt off into the treetops. With another spin, he hurled a fresh barrage of spikes their way. Derek raised his arms to shield his face, letting his neutron steel armor absorb the brunt of the blows. Isabel raised her protective barrier again, but the white glow flickered and dimmed under the relentless impact of the spikes. She had already been exhausted before this uneven fight began, and she wouldn't have lasted much longer. With a mental command, Derek maxed out the armor's reinforcement. It would slow him down, but dodging wasn't an option right now. He had to find a way to shield her. Warnings flooded his display. The servos in his right arm were damaged. Pushing through the alarms, he forced himself to his feet and launched at the man with a powerful leap. Isabel feinted with a thrust, sending crackling arcs of electricity from her sword's tip. They shattered harmlessly against the ever-spinning chain. Derek closed in at nearly the same moment, lunging forward with his plasma blade, but the chain slashed against it, deflecting the strike and sending a spray of sparks. He gritted his teeth and retreated, regrouping alongside Isabel. Landing a hit seemed impossible. That damn chain blocked every attack. At this rate, they were both going to be torn apart. It was time to change tactics. "You're not even trying," the man taunted, shaking his head in mock disappointment. "Is this all you've got?" "You know," Derek said, panting. "Your chain is really interesting. I'd love to study it." "Well then, let me oblige you," the thug shouted, hurling the chain straight at him. The Nova's tactical system kicked in, guiding Derek's hand to intercept the chain midair with reflexes impossible for any human. The man blinked in disbelief, then scowled and yanked on the chain with a grunt. That bastard's strength was off the charts. Derek's heart pounded in his throat. How was that even possible? He pushed the actuators in his arm to their limits just to keep the chain from being ripped from his grip. Gritting his teeth, he redirected even more reactor power to the finger servos, tightening his hold. A normal chain would have crumpled like a tin can under that pressure. This one didn't even flinch. Derek cursed through gritted teeth. Nothing was as it seemed. That guy's bones and muscles shouldn't have been physically capable of exerting that much force, and a simple metal chain shouldn't have withstood the pressure of his actuators. And yet, it was happening. There had to be a limit to the absurdities of this place. Another burst of crackling lightning shot from Isabel's sword. With a flick of his free hand, the man conjured a wall of water that swallowed the attack whole. The wave surged forward, slamming into Isabel and sending her sprawling. Her sword slipped from her grasp, clattering against the damp ground. Water? How many more tricks did this guy have? Sweat dripped down Derek's face, his ears throbbing with the sound of his own pulse. The armor's internal environmental controls were struggling to keep up. There had to be a weakness he could exploit. He couldn't be that invincible. He activated the plasma blade in his free hand and brought it to the chain. A sharp hiss and a thin wisp of white smoke rose as the searing edge met metal. No material, not even neutron steel, could withstand that kind of heat without taking damage. The thug grinned, his rotting teeth bared. "You can't cut through this chain with your little toy human golem." And he was right. The chain showed no signs of damage. Fortunately for Derek, that wasn't his plan. He grinned inside his helmet, teeth clenched. "I'm not trying to cut it. I'm just running a physics experiment." He pressed the plasma blade tighter against the chain and held it there. Within seconds, the dull gray metal turned orange, then red hot. The man's grin faltered as he stared at his chain, now glowing with searing heat. The air above it shimmered like that of a sun-scorched desert. Derek tilted his head. Did you know metals are generally excellent conductors of heat? I was curious to see if your magical chain was an exception. And apparently, it's not. At least in this, it behaves like ordinary metal. You know, I wasn't sure after seeing how it blocked the warden's electricity. But maybe what she's using isn't real electricity. Just something that looks like it. The intense red of the molten metal spread visibly along the chain, creeping closer and closer to the man's hands. His eyes widened in alarm as he hastily conjured another wave of water to douse it. Derek's grin widened. Bad move. The moment the water struck the chain, it erupted into a cloud of scalding steam. Boiling droplets sprayed in all directions, searing both combatants. Derek's armor absorbed the heat effortlessly, but the same couldn't be said for the man. With a choked scream, he clutched his scorched face, releasing the chain as he collapsed to the ground. Derek leapt forward, slamming the man to the ground in an instant, his armored boot pressing against his throat. The still glowing chain dangled from his other hand. Now, if you don't mind, I'd like my sphere back, Derek said. The man stared up at him, wide-eyed with fear. The boot on his throat made every breath a struggle. Frantically, he dug into his pocket and pulled out the small sphere, its faint yellow light pulsing softly. Derek snatched it from his hand and dangled the chain in front of him. Want this back? The man's pupils shrank at the sight of the red-hot chain, and he quickly shook his head. Derek shrugged and hurled the chain deep into the jungle. It vanished into the dense foliage, far enough that it would take hours to recover if he could find it at all. Behind him, Isabel was already struggling to her feet. She stared at Derek, who still had the stranger pinned. You did it? Oh, praise be to Orbisar. Derek opened his mouth to respond, but a glaring red message flashed across his display. Energy depleted. He tried to move, nothing. His entire body was locked in place,